Good morning. Welcome to IG's early morning call. It's Tuesday, the 6th of March. Let's take a look at the headlines. And we saw some breaking news across the weekend coming through from China, where it released its growth forecast for 2023, which are below economists' expectations. A disappointment there. We'll take a look at the market reaction. Meanwhile, the US dollar is in focus. A whole heap of news out this week from central banks, but in amongst them will be 2 days of testimony from the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. And soft commodities on the rise. Sugar taking today's medal at a 6-year high. More on that to come. Let's take a look at what's happening in volatility as we see very nearly breaking of this line of support on the 16th of February, so at 20, which, as we've said before, is significant. Anything below 20 means it's a little bit more difficult for us traders to get the edge in terms of a bite on a good trade. And the markets are less volatile. And this is exactly what's happening. You can see in the grand scheme of things, it seems to want to go lower. The low point we had was back on the 2nd of February, down at 18.9. So this move down would seem at least to see more money going into risk assets, which is what we've been seeing. Not too far away from the 8044 in the London markets, the 7950 at the moment. We are expecting a slightly stronger start in the London markets, but I think if anything, it's slightly better off in the European markets. On Friday, we were ever so close to a new recent high for the German DAX. Remember that high we saw there back on the 9th of February was a 32.57% rise from the lows that we had back in October last year. Well, on Friday, we were ever so close to breaking that, which would have taken us up then to levels not seen since February 2022. Didn't quite get there, but it was a very strong day on Friday. And broadly speaking, we're holding on to all those gains. But the breaking news headlines is in France, we have just seen another new all-time record high for the French CAC 40, breaking the 7,400 for the first time ever. This red dotted line is the intraday 24-hour market record high that we've just seen scored. We have just pulled back from that at 73.79, but it's 74.01 was the record high we saw earlier on this morning. So that's looking as though that too is going to open at a record high, or a high, I should say, on the markets this morning. Overnight in Asia, I think this is one of the reasons as to why we've seen gains across the European markets at the start today, because we now have gains pretty much across the board. And in fact, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Stock Index, I'll mention this in just a minute in the context of that disappointing expectation of growth out in the Chinese economy this year that we saw over the weekend. Hang Seng Stock Index opened with negativity, but that too has now gained some upside. Nikkei 225 gaining on the session in today's trade by a margin of 1.1%. I want to show you the Nikkei because I think this is the one that's worth looking at. Very strong day on Friday. And indeed, intraday today, we've seen the highest print that we've seen this year. 1st of December 2022 was the last time we were at that intraday high that we've seen in today's session. So that was a significant move in the trading day today. So gains across the board in the Asia-Pacific markets. All this coming through after what was a positive session on Wall Street on Friday, with gains across the board for all the major indices, and the NASDAQ, the growth stock index, doing the best bit of business, I should say, briskly on the upside, up almost 2% on the session on Friday. So it was really all about some of the really big tech stocks making up some of the recent poor lost ground that we've seen. And you can see as we look at the chart on Friday, breaking what was our line of resistance at 12,258, which is the high we had back on the 13th of December. And again, it was confirmed there on the 27th of January. So that's back up over that we've not seen for a couple of weeks, 12,323. And we're building on that at the moment with another gain at the start of the session today for tech stocks. I want to show you the Dow. Same sort of price action. We're holding on to the gains we've seen on Friday at 33,393. Now, according to a Chinese government work report released over the weekend, the country has a growth set target for this year at around 5% for 2023. Now, this is a disappointment to the economists that have been looking for something a little bit stronger. It is a rebound from last year's 3% growth, but analysts generally expected China to set a GDP target above 5%, not around. In the report presented by Li Keqiang, China also set a goal of 3% for the consumer price index and a 5.5% unemployment rate for people in cities, saying it would create around 12,000 new urban jobs. The chief of the central bank also addressed the real estate problem that the country is currently facing, which impaired China's economic growth. He said we should ensure effective risk prevention and mitigation in high quality leading real estate enterprises, helping them improve debt to asset ratios and prevent unregulated expansion in the real estate market to promote stable development of the real estate sector. Just a quick reference as to what's been happening with the Chinese yuan. It's weaker today. This is the US dollar rising today. We're back up above the 200-day moving average at 69.251. Talking about the economy, a little bit later on today, we get the release of the UK's global construction PMI data, 9:30 this morning. Market awaiting that data, anticipated to rise to 49.1 in February, remaining under 50 for a third straight month, indicating contraction. In January, the index dropped to 48.4, its lowest level since May 2020, largely due to weaker client demand and fewer new project starts in recent months. Just a quick reference on sterling against the US dollar. We are up against what is overall a weaker dollar in the session today, despite the fact the dollar has risen against the Chinese yuan. We'll see in just a minute that we've got a weaker dollar. Second day in a row of gains at 178.18. Just a reference of what's happening with that dollar basket. You can see there down today. And in fact, if we close at these levels, it'll be the lowest close we've seen since the 22nd of February. Just before we take a look at the euro dollar, 10 o'clock this morning, retail sales in the Eurozone forecast to fall for a fourth straight month. Economists anticipating a 1.8% drop in January on a yearly basis. Meanwhile, in the States, later on today, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, we get factory orders expected to fall 1.8% in January month on month. Just a quick reference on the euro dollar trade. You can see second day in a row there of gains at 106.52. Now, this week will be punctuated by a few central bank meetings and also speeches that could move the global foreign exchange market, starting tomorrow with the RBA, followed later in the day by the Fed Chair Jerome Powell's testimony to the US Senate, on Wednesday the Bank of Canada and Powell's testimony to the House Financial Services Committee, and on Friday the Bank of Japan interest rate decision and non-farm payrolls. Let's start with Powell's two-day semi-annual testimony to the Senate and the House. The Fed Chair is likely to mirror the latest Fed report to Congress on monetary policy and the economy published on Friday. The report was an opportunity to reiterate what dominates the Fed debate. Labour markets remaining extremely tight, and with workers still in short supply, inflation continues to punch well above the FOMC objective, which means that economic growth needs to slow further. Tomorrow, the Reserve Bank of Australia is forecast to raise interest rates by another 25 basis points to 3.6%. This would be the 10th rate hike since May last year. At its last meeting in February, the RBA said that inflation remains too high and that further hikes would be needed. On Wednesday, the Bank of Canada could be the first of the main central banks to keep its interest rates unchanged in the months ahead at 4.5%. At its previous monetary policy meeting, the BOC said it now wants to keep rates on hold to assess the impact of cumulative rate increases. And lastly, on Friday, the Bank of Japan will decide on interest rates. No changes expected. This will be the Governor Kuroda's last meeting. The key short-term interest rates expected to remain at a negative 0.1% and 10-year bond yields around flat. Meanwhile, NFP on Friday, early expectations are there for 200,000 job creations. Last month, the report surprised the market by announcing 517,000 job creations. The unemployment rate's expected to remain at 3.4%. Average hourly earnings to rise 4.7% year on year after 4.4% 1 month ago. Just want to go back to this euro dollar trade just to take a look at this in the context of what we've seen and what we're expecting this week. If you are long on this chart, you'd want to put your stop underneath this rising line of support. It's quite a close stop loss where you put your stop if you're long. So your stop just below the 106 level, 106.53 is where we are. Price target up here at 107.87. Now, let's take a look at what's happening in terms of just one of the stocks we thought we'd mention this morning coming through from the RNS. It's Clarkson. This is the FTSE 250 listed shipping company. And I want to show you this chart. This is the long-term chart. Record high at 42.27. We'll open at 33.15. And I think I've spotted what looks like a pretty good number out this morning. In fact, the headline says it all. Record underlying profit before taxation of £100.9 million. 69.4 million this time last year. That's an increase of a whopping 45.4%. Underlying earnings per share increasing 51.1%. The company says it was particularly strong performance for the shipping company in the broking segment. Full year dividend, 93 pence, giving a rise to a 20th consecutive year of dividend growth. Now, this is a company which takes, in part of its business, takes goods around the world, and shipping rates have really done a lot of brisk business recently, and it's benefiting from that. So the big question is, for me, opening at 33.15, do we get a trade above the 33.62, which are the recent highs we had? That intraday high there was 34.40 back on the 6th of January. If you are long on this, your stop would go underneath this little bit of a rally we've seen recently here. So I would put your stop personally around about this sort of 32.20 level. 33.15 is where we're opening. 33.62 for me is the break above which we were then, broadly speaking, taking us up then to levels not seen since the 17th of August 2022. Meanwhile, other earnings out this week. Let's take a look at what's happening in the UK as we look out from this point on. Broadly speaking, the earnings season coming to an end. Reports in the UK still to come. Tomorrow we've got Greggs, we've got Ashtead. Wednesday we've got Legal and General Group. Thursday, PageGroup and Aviva. Let me just round off with one other area of the market to watch. I want to bring up a chart for Silverlight. Silverlight is the proof that the debacle around what we've been hearing with the move, sorry, did I say Silverlight? Silvergate, I should say, as I was writing in Silverlight. Let me just show you a Silvergate share price as to what's happening with this company. It is still trading. It closed Friday down at 576.5. It was up 0.7%, but the previous day it had lost something like around about 50% of its value. The bank that serviced FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried's fallen empire says it's suspending its exchange network. Now, its long-term issuer has cut to its debt, its debt ratings to CA from B3. That was Moody's. And this collapse of FTX has really spooked other Silvergate customers, resulting in an $8.1 billion run on the bank. 60% of its deposits walked out of the door in just one quarter. And this is the direction of travel for the company, and it's looking more and more perilous. But this is proof that the FTX collapse and what's going on in the crypto space has hit the real banking sector. Of course, this is what Silvergate is. Silvergate is a real bank. Its roots are in real banking. It moved into digital currencies back in 2014, and since then it's been a bit of a problem. Now we've got this most recent development has hit Silvergate again. So we are expecting that stock to open at 576.5 later on today. Let's take a look at the commodity markets. I want to kick off with what's going on in the oil sector. I want to look first of all at the Baker Hughes rig count on Friday, showing a drop in total rig count to 749 from 753 in the previous week. The number of oil rigs in operations fell by 8 to 592. It was a good week overall last week for the price of crude. This is US crude, rising from the lows we had back on Thursday, 23rd of Feb at 73.82, and closing out Friday's session at a high of 79.94. Today we're at 79.27, a little bit of easing back on the big gains that we saw on Friday. The gold markets continuing to see the rise that we've seen recently. Good week last week, rising from Monday's lows all the way down at 18.08. And there we are now trading at 18.57. So we're adding weight to the price of gold. I'll be talking to Simon Popple a little bit later in the week. He's a gold investor, and he'll be giving us what he thinks will be the outlook for gold. Of course, he's obviously got a particularly upbeat view on it. But just to support that, this little trend looks like it could well start to continue or continue this week. We've got the MACD turning around this week, where we've got the blue line over the red dotted line, giving us an indication that this appears to be a little bit of a trend in place now. How far this goes remains to be seen. You'd be putting a Fibonacci on from the highs that we've seen there to give you a little bit of an idea as to where the next headwinds could be, just to show you what's going on here, where we are at 1858. The next headwind is at 61.8%, which is the 1900 level. Nice round number for us technical traders to looking at potentially for a price target to aim for if you're long on this in the longer term. And let me just quickly keep the chart and just talk a little bit about sugar because this soft commodity is on the move. This is New York sugar. It's at a 6-year high, up as we saw there closing out Friday's session, excuse me, above the 20.84 level. After pointing out last week the recent rally of orange juice and cocoa, sugar attracting our attention this morning. This just happens to be the New York number 11. There's also sugar London number 5 to watch out for as well. Same sort of price action that we've seen. It certainly seems like there's a lot of interest in these soft commodities. Back at 10:30 this morning with charting the markets and looking ahead. There aren't any major companies to watch out for here in the UK, but the FTSE 250 listed shipping company Clarkson could be on the move this morning. What looks to be a decent set of numbers out for investors this morning.